Greetings, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I have drifted into the Underworld. The Star Wars Underworld. I have a bad feeling about this.
Here we go. We must go to the lower levels. The Underworld.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
You're after something.
Ben.
Since I've started the Underworld, I've met so many great friends.
Chris.
I grew up in the 1990s, and mall packaging is nostalgic for me.
Dominic.
What I love most about Star Wars is that it's fun and it's all around good times.
So, this is where the fun begins.
May the Force be with us.
This thing really moves!
Woo! I like this!
I can't believe you came all this way to see me.
Why am I not in the intro? I gotta come up with a snappy line.
What's up, Star Wars fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Star Wars Underworld podcast. We are your source for the latest breaking Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion each and every week on this. And this week on the show, somehow, Rick McCallum has returned to discuss the ever-mysterious Star Wars Underworld series. Also, the cast and crew behind Andor Season 2 have been making the press circuit. We'll break down what they've been saying. Plus, of course, stay tuned for another segment of hashtag Ask the SWU. All this and more on this episode of the Star Wars Underworld podcast. And I am excited to announce that we are all here, all the hosts of the show.
Surprisingly.
Together.
What is this madness?
There seems to be too many people on the screen.
I know. This is throwing me off here. I'm used to like a few other people, or just me and someone else, or watching two other people. This is very different. But we are all here. And we're all geared up to talk about this stuff. My name is Chris, and joining me, he's back. So that means he's my favorite co-host again. It's Dominic Jones.
Hello, Chris. Hello, Ben. Hello, Hannah. Hello, everybody. Yes, back to reclaim my rightful place as the favorite co-host. Very excited to be here. I'm glad that we could all be here, not to talk about the Star Wars show that premieres in about a month's time, not to talk about the updates about the new Star Wars movie that's coming out in about a year and a couple of months, but to talk about the TV show that was written 15 plus years ago and will never see the light of day. That is what we live for here at the Star Wars Underworld podcast, not to be confused with the Star Wars Underworld TV show that didn't happen. But, you know, look, episodes of this podcast also cost upwards of $60 million sometimes. So Rick McCallum really has to work to get this made. I'm very excited to talk about that. That was a really fun interview to see Rick McCallum back out there. And yeah, it's going to be a great show. Yeah,
no, as the Star Wars Underworld podcast, we are obligated to talk about Star Wars Underworld news whenever there is. That we have to spend as much of the show as possible every time there's news about it. Because what should be happening is we should be reviewing a new episode of Star Wars Underworld every week. That's what should be happening. But that's not happening, and it's not been happening, and it never happened. So we have to settle for just these tidbits that happen once every 5 years. So excited for that. Also joining us, it's Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy.
How's it going, everybody? Yeah, I got a chance to listen to that interview earlier today with Rick McCallum. Great to hear Rick again. Back in the news. It's always just such a legend. And I was disappointed, to say the least, with the interviewers that they neglected to grill Rick on the fact that there's no retribution. There's no anything for stealing the name of a certain podcast, for ruining the algorithm. Whenever you Google Star Wars Underworld, we don't come up a lot of times. Just Rick, come on, throw us a bone here. You owe us.
Yeah,
he
does. Because at no point prior to the establishment of this podcast, or when it was just a Facebook page or website or anything like that, had anybody ever used the phrase Underworld in relation to Star Wars. Never happened before.
No.
Never happened before.
We coined it.
Hasn't happened since. Never been mentioned. Never been mentioned once.
I'm sorry.
Never.
Adding a semicolon between Star Wars and Underworld doesn't make it any better. Just saying.
And that's how you know it's from a bygone era, because there was a time when titles just stopped using the semicolon. It was just stopped being Star Wars semicolon something. It was just Star Wars Andor.
Yeah, it's weird.
Star Trek Into Darkness. Like it was that they just got rid of it for a while. I feel like it's making a comeback. Andor, a Star Wars story. Anyways.
Yeah, it might.
It's the best part of the show when we talk about punctuation. Anyways.
I know. Well, now it just differentiates between the podcast and the show. So I'm grateful that they do that because we don't have the colon in our title. I couldn't say that either, but
we put the colon in Star Wars.
I made it through. I powered through that sentence.
Show's gonna need a colonoscopy by the end of it.
Oh man! To find out why we don't have one. Okay. That other face you see and voice you hear all the way from the Raeside, it's Hannah.
G'day there. Great to be back in the quadrant, the ultimate talking round table we have here. So very excited.
It's a square table.
Square table, true, actually. But Rick McCallum, yeah, hilarious. No need to further the point of just what's he doing? Where is he doing? And then he's just randomly on like a random Tuesday. He's like, yeah, let's talk about it. It's amazing.
So I actually went down this rabbit hole earlier today because when finding out about this news, I had to figure out where is Rick McCallum. And what I found out was that he's been making films in the Czech Republic for like the last 10 years.
That is so weird and so great. Good on him. The Czech, out of all places, do they have a big up and coming film industry there? Or
they
something?
They do. Actually, there's a lot of rumors about various Star Wars things happening there, and it's sometimes
you're kidding in the Czech Republic.
Yes. Yes, it is a thing. It is a thing. So excited to talk about that and much more. But we got some things to plug real quick. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. If you're listening to us on a podcast app, make sure you subscribe as well. I've already got a few super chats coming in, so we'll read those in just a bit. Make sure if you want to add to them, now is your opportunity if you're watching live on YouTube. And if you usually watch the show not live, you can also support us by becoming a channel member on YouTube. And also don't forget to review us if you're listening on a podcast app as well. You can join the SWU Network Discord in a link in the description and show notes. We got lots of fun stuff going on there. Ben, what is happening tomorrow on the SWU Network Discord?
Yeah, so we will be doing a movie night. We'll actually be watching something Star Wars for the first time in a while. I know that sounds weird.
What?
So we will be watching, I think first we'll be watching the episode Secret Cargo from season 3 of Star Wars Rebels. We're kind of doing a little Andor tie-in, being that the entirety of Rebels takes place during, I think, Andor season 2. So it'll be interesting. And then we'll also be watching the 2-parter In the Name of the Rebellion. But 3 really stellar episodes that I'm looking forward to getting into. It should be
nice.
Fun.
Is that the episode with bloody As Morgan? Is he in that one?
No,
no.
It's a Secret Cargo
No,
one.
it's the episode with Mon Mothma after the Gorman massacre. I know this because in preparation for Andor, I watched that episode on the on my way to work. I downloaded it onto my phone and watched it while sitting on the subway, just chilling, watching Rebels as one does.
Yeah.
Amazing. So check that out on the Star Wars Underworld Network Discord.
Wow, you said it really Australian there, Chris. That was an incredible Australian. Amazing. That sounded so Australian. Shit, wow.
Spending too much time around you.
Finally.
I know. Yeah.
Absolutely. So,
amazing.
So check that out. Link is in the description and the show notes. And also check out all the other shows on the Star Wars Underworld Network. We got Hannah's show, The Raeside, I Can and Tales from Beyond the Galaxy Tractor Bib, and more. Oh, is that Mon Mothma? It's very out.
It is Mon Mothma, but I'm trying to like.
I feel like I was playing a game where it's like name this out of focus Star Wars character.
Name that Pokemon.
I'm like I know what shape that is. That's Mon Mothma's shape.
After the we haven't played a game since Ben subjected us to Mississippi Town or Star Wars Planet. But I feel like that might be the next game. Is who is this out of focus Star Wars character?
I can definitely do
Oh,
that
that's
because
good.
I can come prepared for that next time. I totally can.
It'll be absolute trash to listen to, but watching it might be entertaining.
That looks
Dash
kind of like
Rendar.
an Anakin.
It is a Phantom Menace Obi-Wan,
Ah,
but he's like he
Oh,
looks
yeah,
so
yeah.
stupid in that. This
It's a
could be a fun
keychain.
game.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a keychain. OG. Yeah.
Well, that one's this one's I've got should be pretty obvious.
Oh, it's Yoda.
Oh yeah.
Oh, guys, what's this? Ooh, you can't tell what this is, can you?
okay, we're just gonna have to see mine focuses.
Yeah.
I can't.
Well,
do
yeah.
this.
Why is it perfect focus?
Yeah.
I guess I just have nice
For-
things over here. Okay.
For everybody listening, Chris held up a Baby Yoda mug, and Ben held up the biggest friggin' Din Djarin bobblehead you've ever seen in your life. That thing might have been life size. I'm not
like unnecessarily large.
Yeah, I'm not convinced Pedro Pascal isn't under that helmet just bobbling.
It's
his head
it's
around.
actually it's legit the size of Grogu. Like, I'm not even kidding.
That's awesome.
Incredible. All right. Well, let's get into the news, shall we? And we will start, of course, with Star Wars: Underworld, the never produced live action series. Rick McCallum was interviewed by the Young Indie Chroniclers podcast, which I guess is a podcast about the young Indiana Jones adventures, which was what McCallum's, I guess, his first project at Lucasfilm. And they asked him about kind of the final days of Star Wars. They asked him about Star Wars under George Lucas. They asked him about the Underworld series. Here's what he said. Here's what he revealed. This is the kind of the stuff that's getting the headlines. The lowest budget he could manage for an episode was $40 million. Wow. They had 60 third draft scripts written, so that's pretty far along. They tried to pitch it to HBO, and it sounded like at one point HBO might have been interested if the head of HBO didn't get caught up in scandal at the time. He described it as dark, sexy, and violent. Each episode was bigger than the films, and it's one of the great disappointments of our lifetimes that it didn't get made.
Yes.
What do we think of this new intel from Rick? New old intel.
I just want to hypothesize what made it that price point for those episodes, because I mean, on one half, I'm like, credit. I feel like this show, it would have been made if it was like kind of created now and thought up now. Like, I feel like the kind of arena of streaming shows, like this seemed like a streaming show. And you know, obviously we have the prices of a lot of the Disney Plus shows now, but I'm like, yeah, what do you say? Was it 40 million an episode or 60 million? Yeah, 40. Like what is driving that price? Like, is the real life sets that we're gonna have to make, like, you know, a full underground, you know, to just do all these scenes in? What do you think?
Yeah, they were gonna go to space and shoot it on the moon. No, it's so the one like little piece of actual footage that we have that's sort of related to Underworld is that test footage that leaked online a couple years ago, and in it you see them filming this weird little chase sequence with stormtroopers, and everybody's in costume, everybody's in front of a green screen, and all of the visual effects from the background are being rendered in real time. So you're looking at the monitor, and instead of seeing a green screen as you would have seen on the sets of episodes 1, 2, and 3, you're seeing what the digital background would look like. You're seeing what Coruscant would look like. And I think that's what George wanted to do, because George never just wanted to make movies later in life. He was always about pushing the technology forward. And I think he saw this as the future. He saw this as, you know, the way movies were going to be made. You wouldn't need real sets. You would just put your actors in front of a green screen. You'd create the backgrounds digitally, and then you start shooting, and they would walk through the set. And even though they couldn't see anything around them, when you looked at the monitor, you could see right away what it was going to look like. There wasn't that phase of, oh, what is this going to look like? There wasn't like, you didn't have to use your imagination. You could just see it right there. And in a lot of ways, the volume that they use on the Mandalorian and Ahsoka and all the shows is a variation on this, because again, when you look at the monitor, when you look at what's being filmed in camera, you can see it looks how it's going to look when it shows up on our TV screens. The difference, of course, is that the actors can look around and go, oh, I'm on Tatooine, oh, I'm on the space station, oh, I'm on Mandalore. Like they can tell where they are, which they couldn't before. And I think ILM, who would have been working on this technology that George wanted to do with the real-time rendering, were also, I think they also are the ones who really pushed the volume technology. And I think the two things kind of worked in concert, and they wound up going more for the volume, because the big criticism of green screen work from people like Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen and all the people that worked on the prequels is that it's really hard as an actor to get into the scene, because you are just standing there with nothing around you. It's really hard to tell what you're supposed to be doing, supposed to be feeling when you can't see it. The volume allows you to see it. And so the reason for that price tag, I think, is because they were developing this technology at the same time. Probably if you were to try and if they had succeeded in developing that technology, the cost would have eventually come down. Not every show would cost $40 million an episode, but the first show would, because that's where all of the work, all of the time, all the effort went into creating, tinkering with, and then perfecting that technology. So that's, I think, is what the ultimate cost was. The other thing is, look at the Clone Wars. Look at how George's mind was working at the time. He didn't want to be hampered by any sort of limitations. He'd be like, we'll have an episode where they go to Coruscant, then Naboo, then Mustafar. Like he's just like, we'll have 7 planets in the same episode. And so that, there was no a Mandalorian episode is largely set on one planet. And so even if you have to build a bunch of sets, you can use those same sets for the entire episode. I don't think George was going to do that. I think you're going to have a lot of new locations consistently happening. And so I think those two things are what were ballooning this budget in a way that, McCallum couldn't get under control of, where anybody was interested in actually trying it.
And I think too, and I think this is something that we talked about years and years ago when information first started coming out about this series, before we even knew that it was canceled, was that George and Rick probably specifically George, didn't want this to visually look any different than the Star Wars films. And we know how much a Star Wars film, it costs hundreds of millions of dollars to make a Star Wars film that's about 2 hours long. So if you're talking about an episode that's 40 minutes to an hour.
Chris, I'm just going to interrupt you real quick, because the Young Indie Chroniclers, the people who actually did the interview, are listening live and they're in the chat and deserve a massive shout out for tracking down Rick in the Czech Republic and doing this interview, which is fantastic. And we'll touch on a lot of the different things that Rick said. So shout out Young Indie Chroniclers. If you're a fan of Indiana Jones, you're a fan of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, definitely got to check this out. And if you're a fan of Rick McCallum, the way we all are, should at the very least listen to this interview, because it was truly spectacular, and more than just the 55 seconds they put on YouTube. Go on Apple Podcasts and listen to the whole thing. But
and it's like a 3-part thing. It's like a 3-part thing. Like the one that made the portion of the interview that made the news is like one of 3 parts that they did with Rick, and it's all great. So definitely go check them out.
Yes. Sorry, Chris, continue.
I was doing math in my head when this amazing thing happened. So anyway, basically the point that I was trying to make was, if you're gonna make, it took them. Young Indie Chronicler says that it took them a year to track down Rick McCallum. That's amazing. Totally worth it. Totally worth it. Awesome. So if you think about how much a Star Wars movie costs to make 2 hours of a Star Wars movie, honestly, $40 million it's like $1 million a minute. That's actually kind of almost like a good deal for a TV show if you're making it at the same cost. It looks like they're cutting actually some costs, like, I don't know, maybe paying A-list actors or something that goes up to the cost of a Star Wars movie and the marketing budget or whatever. So that I think that's a big piece of it too, is like, I don't think George wanted to put an inferior product on TV. He didn't want to put something on TV that didn't look like the movies, that you couldn't put side by side with the movies in a theater and have it be the same quality. And I think that probably ultimately is the number one reason why the show never got made, was he didn't want to compromise. I'm sure that, when you're talking about the business of television, you are making something with a budget, you're airing it on TV, and then your money comes from advertising and cable subscriptions if you're at a cable or premium channel. So somebody like HBO, they very little advertising. All their money is probably going to be coming from people's HBO packages that they purchase on cable and satellite TV, and eventually HBO Max, and as it become Max and all that stuff. And so I'm sure they did their math and were like, we can't make $40 million back for each of these episodes based on how much money people are paying for HBO. And I think George Lucas didn't want to compromise and, reduce the quality of the show to lesser than the Star Wars movies in order to make it economical for HBO to make a profit off of airing this thing. And honestly, from what we've heard about the Clone Wars, it sounds like that was a similar situation, just at a slightly smaller scale. George is willing to foot the bill for that one, based on what we've heard from that. It sounds like that probably wouldn't have made its money back either if he hadn't have been maybe licensing it to Cartoon Network for less than it cost for him to make it.
Yeah. I think the most interesting thing to me that Rick said, more than any sort of description of episodes or anything, is when he talked about going to HBO and how close it was to getting made. He talks about Chris Albrecht, who was the head of HBO at the time, was really interested in the project, was really interested in making it happen. And if HBO couldn't fund it completely independently, they were going to go look for an international partner, make it into a co-production, which is how, funnily enough, is how a lot of stuff gets produced, especially a lot of smaller stuff, which is sort of funny that you're taking that method of making something that people use on independent movies, where they get a bunch of different funding sources to make it happen, and applying it to something as massive as Star Wars. But HBO would put some money in, some international partner or partners would put some money in, and no one individual place would foot the bill for the $40 million per episode. But if they got enough people who were with deep enough pockets who were interested in making it happen to make it happen, then they would have, and it would have happened. Chris Albrecht ultimately resigned in disgrace from HBO because of some allegations and stuff that happened that Rick really skims over in the interview. You look at that man's Wikipedia page and compared to the way Rick describes what went down, you're like, oh, that's two very different things, Mr. McCallum. But it showed that like there was genuine interest. And one thing Rick said is that they would sort of dangle other ideas, other things that to entice studios. At one point he says, he kind of jokes, we tell them we would make another Star Wars movie. And he sort of says like, he sort of says it in a way where like they'd kind of be lying. But that is actually how the Clone Wars movie happened.
True.
Is, again, George was making the show, and he was looking for a network. He was looking for someone to, put some financing behind it, to be sure, but also to air it. And the reason, a big part of Warner Brothers getting involved in that project was that they would be able to release the Clone Wars movie. George and Filoni always say, oh yeah, we looked at the first few episodes and they were so great. We just thought it'd be so cool to get it made. And I'm sure there's an element of that like, it'd just be cool to put these in theaters. But the reality of what it was Warner said, well, we're interested, but like, I don't know, is a Star Wars cartoon really going to draw people in? And they said, well, what about a Star Wars cartoon movie? That was sort of the comeback from George. And Warner's all of a sudden like, oh, now we're interested. Now they come on board, they finance part of the project, and ultimately I think George financed most of Clone Wars, but a little bit chipping in from one of the biggest production companies out there never hurt. And that's how we wind up with the Clone Wars movie and then 5 seasons of the show. And so it's interesting, like, maybe that's what would have happened with this. Maybe, the first 2-3 episodes of the show, not unlike what's happening now with Andor and its arcs, get combined into one movie, and the release of Underworld begins with a movie that's 90 minutes long, 2 hours long, and is really just the first 3 episodes. So episodes rewritten and recut to make one cohesive-ish story that then leads into, and tune in this fall on HBO to find out what happens next to whoever these characters were, Boba Fett and Han Solo,
Sheev
Palpatine. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. But like, I'm literally just like watching the footage right now, and because I haven't seen it probably since they released it. This is 5 years ago was when this YouTube video was the Star Wars Underworld test footage is up on YouTube. You can find this. You can find this on your own if you want to go look at it. I highly recommend it because it's very fascinating, and just like it is very innovative because like you're talking about what actors like McGregor talked about, how like, oh my god, there's nothing on, there's just all green screen. You see those set photos from Revenge of the Sith, just like there's very few sets. It's all very green screen. This is that on steroids. This is Ewan McGregor's worst nightmare. This is everything is green. Like there's literally just a few props, a few actors, and everything else. Like every shot in this, it appears to have some type of visual effect or some kind of pre-visualization going on simultaneously. There's almost none of this is real, and it's amazing, and it's very innovative, and it would not have been great for actors who hate that, but George was definitely onto something, and kind of like on the road to the volume, creating something that would ultimately be much cheaper, because I know, yes, and even today we have the issue of special effects artists being vastly overworked and vastly underpaid and given insane timelines and all this kind of stuff, just terrible conditions they're put under. But it is way cheaper just to not have a set and just shoot on a screen. Like people can do that in their garage now. Like it's no big deal. And that's what George was going for. And I think it's fascinating to look back on that and see where this could have gone, and where the technology would have gone. Because obviously the volume in this are two completely different things, but it's basically the same concept. And say George doesn't sell Lucasfilm, he stays on and he does this, and maybe the volume comes along and makes this show possible. But obviously in true George's fashion, it was impossibly ambitious, so ambitious. And the fact that Rick is talking about this being bigger than the films is insane. But would have loved to have seen it, would still love to see it. And Rick in the interview is just like, nope, Disney doesn't want it. Disney's not going to want any other part of this. This is sitting on their shelf and we're never going to see this. And I'm like, I agree with you, Rick, but I really would love to see this.
Well, I'm trying to think. So if there was, Dominic, you said there was like 60 scripts that were made. And so if each one of those cost $40 million, let's see, 4 of those would be 240. So we're talking $2.4 billion would be the cost. I see.
For a TV show.
Lucasfilm was sold for $4 billion. It was $2 billion. It cashed $2 billion in stock. So we're talking about the cost of making the show was more than half of what the entire company was worth at the time.
Yeah. So you wonder why it never got made.
And I think they wanted to do more than 60 episodes as well, because was that talk about how it's going to spin off into 4 different shows and like all that as well. So I think they wanted like hundreds of episodes.
And this is like today, right now, at least last I checked, like the most expensive TV show, the most money has ever been spent on a TV show was on Amazon's The Rings of Power, which was $1 billion. Just to throw that out there. And that's in today's money, not in 2010 money back when they were doing this.
That's true. So I mean, that's in the ballpark there.
But it would be hard to calculate because I think, inflation and different money to what everything was valued back then. But then also I think a lot of the cost was going into things that like they couldn't do and they hadn't invented, and things that they needed to do a certain way, where it's like, I think there's a lot more processes now that probably cut a lot of costs for the episodes. So it's true. Like maybe it would really cost like 15 million an episode, and then
now it would
average like
it would have been a lot of George would have been a lot of George wandering into a room full of production people and going, "Hey, do that!" And they're like, "George, it's impossible. We can't do it." And like, "We'll just do it anyway." And he walks out of the room, and they're just like, "Oh my god, what are we gonna do?"
I think they could do it now. I think they could.
It's that moment from the Phantom Menace documentary where he's got the highlighters and he's at the storyboard and he's like, "This is real, this is fake, this is real, this is fake," and you just see John Knoll panicking in the background. Yeah, it would be fascinating. Like certainly if they were to try to make it today, it wouldn't. You're right. A lot of they would utilize the volume, they would utilize this technology and that sort of thing. So it probably might not be the 40 million that they're talking about. But I still when I think about the show and when I see or when we hear about it from Rick and other people, it just sounds so much more ambitious than anything else that Star Wars is doing right now.
Yeah.
Love Mandalorian, love Andor, love Ahsoka, love all of the shows, but all the episodes sort of take place in one location. They aren't. They'll be like one big ambitious thing a season. It doesn't like they aren't like push they're. Here's how I want to phrase it. They're playing within their means. They know what they can be, and they do the best that they can within that. I feel like George would have wanted, one or two ambitious things per episode, rather than, one per season. And, again, we're probably talking about a time when there were 20 episode seasons. And, Mando is 8. Andor is a long season in Star Wars terms because it's 12. And, you hear Diego Luna and Tony Gilroy talk about making Andor and how ambitious that show is and how just making 12 episodes can be kind of brutal. Imagine making 20. Imagine making 20. And maybe 60 scripts isn't 3 seasons. Maybe it's more like 5 seasons. Maybe it's, The Sopranos was 13 episode seasons, even back in the early 2000s, early mid 2000s. So maybe George was thinking more along those lines of like, well, let's do The Sopranos. Let's do 13 episodes. And that would get you to about 5 seasons in 60 scripts. So there's something in there, but I just feel like, I think Rick is right. Like Disney's not going to make it because one, I don't think I think it's too ambitious for anything that they want to do. Just in terms of cost and pushing the technology, and also from what it sounds like, Andor sometimes feels like a departure from classic Star Wars feel in terms of its adultness. I feel like this would I feel like the most adult episode of Andor would be like the safest quote unquote episode of Underworld.
Yeah, it's not comparable at all because I mean, we know the difference between HBO and network. I mean, there's a massive difference between HBO and network as far as the intended audience. And so I definitely think George was going for that adult audience with this show. I mean, there's no question about it, and much more so than anything on Disney Plus has ventured into outside of maybe Deadpool movies.
One of the funniest sort of like reactions to Andor season 1, I remember seeing like a TikTok or something or a reel or something of someone. It was Star Wars fans freaking out when Bix takes off her shirt to reveal another shirt. and like you think about that compared to what you see every week on Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, and you're just like, these are two different things. And I find Rick takes a lot of not so subtle shots at Disney throughout this process. And one of my favorite lines that he says is, Disney definitely would have never offered to buy Star Wars from George if they had made the show. So like this show was going to be, it was going to change our perception of Star Wars. And I think that's really kind of interesting, kind of exciting, and kind of sad that we didn't get to see it. For as much as I have enjoyed everything that we have gotten since then, that plays it within the classic Star Wars parameters. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. And they've done a lot of great stuff, but it would have been really interesting to see, where an unleashed George and McCallum might have gone with this.
I think this would have been competing with Game of Thrones for like top streaming or top like cable show, and probably would have released.
Would have come out around the same time.
Yeah, because Game of Thrones season 1 came out in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on what timeline you're looking at. Like if you're looking at like the timeline that would have happened if the things hadn't happened with the executive at HBO, then maybe that would have been around the time that it would have released.
There was at Toy Fair or some like sort of industry event. There was a poster that was circulated of the future of Star Wars, and it was 2007, The Force Unleashed, 2008, The Clone Wars, 2009, the live action series, and there was Boba Fett's helmet representing the live action series. So, in the perfect world, that's what George and Rick were looking at, and ultimately it never got there. And,
so it might have even beat Game of Thrones to the punch. It might have actually been Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones.
Yeah, exactly.
Rick makes several allusions and makes several comments in saying that like this would have completely upended the saga, that this would have just completely changed everything. And I think he's right. I think this would have been, you know, I think Disney coming in, I think obviously you get different answers from depending on who you talk to, but I think in my opinion, Disney was trying to uphold the status quo of what Star Wars was. And George was always trying to make Star Wars different. I think with Clone Wars, he proved that almost every week. And I think this show, probably what you're saying here is just like, this would have been the next big deal. You're talking about like a sexy, violent show. Star Wars, that's not really Star Wars' bag, generally speaking. You know, we have had sexy, violent stuff in the Disney era, but I think what Rick is talking about is something much more in the vein of, I mean, a lot of streaming shows are now, which is kind of like this off-network, uncensored stuff. Disney Plus is just now starting to get into shows with F-bombs. Like that's the most, so with occasional violence.
Yeah, well, I mean, the best part of Tony Gilroy's live stream is when he today was when he said shit at the very end of it. Just like, all right, we see through the Disney facade for a moment here, even with Andor. Yeah, it would have been fascinating. Ultimately, now, like, you know, the hearing from Rick about how close it got with HBO at one point, where it seemed like there might have been some real movement there. You know, had things gone a different way. Like, I feel like we're getting such like a clear, interesting picture of the behind the scenes of the show. I'm ready to hear about the story. And that's the stuff that we'll never really get. That's the stuff that will always remain secretive, because Disney owns those scripts and they're going to keep them in the vault. You know, Rick says he has a copy. He has copies of them, but he's not supposed to, which is very funny. Again, you know, Mickey Mouse might be showing up at his door in Prague saying, give us back our scripts, Rick. And that would be a very entertaining thing to be the fly on the wall for. But I'd be fascinated to know where they were going with this. Every now and again, you hear little drips and drabs about, you know, this would have happened with Boba Fett, this would have happened with Vader, this would have happened with Han, this would have happened with the Emperor. You know, there's little drips and drabs that get out. But it would be fascinating, because every little tease that we get is just furthers the mystery that is Star Wars Underworld.
I've got an order of things that I want to see, and so this is at the top. Star Wars Underworld scripts, have to read those. The second one is NSYNC scene in Attack of the Clones.
Yep.
And then the third one is the Star Wars Detours episodes. Those are the top three things that they're hiding from us.
I might personally swap out the NSYNC scene for the Lord and Miller cut of Solo. But
that's a good one too. Yeah, that's good.
But
that's my fourth one.
Underworld remains that top thing. You know, if you know, if they said you get a week alone in the Lucasfilm archives, what are you doing first? like first thing I'm doing is going to those scripts and like starting on episode one, page 1, and reading all the way through to the last page of episode 60. And then we'll get into the detour stuff, and then we'll steal some props from A New Hope and whatever. But like it'll, that's what we're starting with.
Kyle Newman, I have an idea for fanboys too.
Fanboys the Revenge. Yeah, it would be just fascinating to see. We got a series of super chats from our buddy Joel Davis about the Underworld series. So I figure we'll get to them now instead of saving them for
great
later.
idea. I was going to suggest that too. Let's go.
Yeah. So Joel says, since we're talking about the Underworld show, thoughts on the Palpatine is evil because of a bad breakup story idea, especially now in 2025. So for those who aren't familiar, a few years ago, someone who was either a writer on the show, I can't remember the exact details. This was either a writer on the show or somebody who was working on 1313 and got to read some of the scripts for the show. 1313 being a video game that would have been set in the same time period and dealt with similar themes and ideas. Whoever this person was, they gave an interview where they said the series would have given us the backstory for Palpatine and how there was this woman that broke his heart, and that's why he's evil the way he is. Yeah, I don't know who wants to take this. I have thoughts, but I'll cede the floor to somebody else first.
It would have been what if George like went really wild and like named the character Marsha or something like that. That would have that would have been pretty wild.
This is one of the reasons why I'm kind of glad this is just stayed as a script and we never saw it, because I'm kind of like just like detours. I'm like 80% excited, 20% scared of this thing, of what it would have been, what it would have added to the Star Wars canon, and just George going just crazy. And like it is fascinating, but like that whole storyline, I'm like, I don't want to argue with the maker here, but you may have gone too far in a few places, and I don't know how I feel about this. And what makes me scared is the fact that it sounds real. It absolutely sounds like something George would do. So I believe it wholeheartedly. This probably was part of the thing, and I think it was said by someone. So like it's I think it adds credence, and I think it actually would have probably made it into an episode.
Yeah.
I think it's a great storyline. I would have loved that. I think it would have been brilliant.
I mean, I'm trying to think now too. There was a little bit of conversation about what Palpatine was doing when he was younger and the Plagueis novel by James Luceno. I remember there was some talk about that. I can't remember though if there were any love interests in that. I think it was more just like talking about his family and stuff and his town or something. So they came close to breaking that into some level of canon.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I don't want to pass judgment on any of these like little like snippets that we hear without knowing the context. Like I want to read that script or watch that episode and decide. It's one of those things that it just sounds so weird out of context that I'm like, give me the context. Rick, drop that script off in my mailbox, or we'll do a dead drop somewhere, and we could like we're passing notes in the Resistance. I feel like let me decide based on that instead of jumping to conclusions based on comments made by the director of the God of War franchise. Like that's where this comes from. It's somebody who. It was from like the video game side who read some of the scripts. The guy's name is Corey Balrog, who would have been who gives us that information. So I'd like to know more before deciding, because it just sounds weird, but could be good, could be terrible, but could be good.
Like it ultimately we're left with, I think you're left with thinking, you can rush to judgment on this stuff, reading it out of context, but ultimately you could do the same with other stuff. Like, Anakin has a Padawan, blah, that's stupid. Or
Mhm.
you're gonna see Anakin and Boba Fett as kids in the prequel trilogy, like that's dumb. Like, okay, let as they say these days, let him cook.
You hipster, Ben. You
Wow.
absolute hipster.
No
You're
cap,
really-
no cap.
Oh my god,
No
you're really
cap.
down with the kids.
Oh my gosh, that is such a sick.
How do you do, fellow kids?
Whoa.
Yeah,
Whoa.
right. Joel goes on to say, second question: would you trade all the Disney era shows and movies we've gotten to live in the timeline where Star Wars Underworld, the TV show, not the podcast,
Jeez.
exists? Would you
Yes,
trade?
Yes, because
it
I've already
all?
seen all the Star Wars TV shows. I can just jump over that universe and I can see all that.
I love how Ben turned this question into just like a one where he has the ability to cross universes. Just jump through reality.
What, do I get a
portals.
memory wipe when I cross the universe? I don't think that's how the
assume that's-
multiverse works.
I assume that's the point of the question, because otherwise there wouldn't really be
Yeah,
it wouldn't be anything to consider if that were the case.
yeah. If you could just have both, sure.
It really depends, I think, also the character focus of the show. Because I think there's an element of almost what we see in Kenobi that could be almost covered in this show. Say if Ahsoka was created the way she was, she left the Order. Like, imagine that we pick up her story, that she's like, we see her leave the Jedi Order, and then we pick up her storyline in the Star Wars Underworld. She's down there, doing shit. Doing stuff. So it kind of depends on the direction, because I feel like some of my favorite things within the Disney era Star Wars content could actually be kind of told in this show. So
yeah.
I would be open to it.
how-
I'd think about it.
It's funny how I've heard people pitch that. I think we've talked about it on the show. One of us has said this, but like the whole idea of like, well, why are they doing all these different shows? Why, and have all the controversy around the Mandoverse, like different shows dealing with different things. It's like, oh, why don't you just do a Star Wars show? I just have it be an anthology and do all this stuff. I think that's kind of what Underworld would have been. I think that's kind of been what the show. I think it would have just been one huge mega show that would have covered a whole bunch of things. It would have started probably in the dark times. It would have just moved forward, and we'd be on season 17 at this point. And it would be all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I do think that the Disney Plus things are innovative. I don't necessarily think that the films are super innovative, but I think that the shows at Disney Plus with the volume are very innovative. So, but the thing is, I think that the Star Wars Underworld show would have been more innovative. I think that would have pushed the industry more than just a little bit more. I do think that Disney Plus has, with their shows, pushed the industry standard forward. I don't think they've just gone the lazy thing and made the same type of stuff that other people would make. I think they have pushed forward the concept of what a show can be. But I think that the show would have pushed it further. So I think it probably would have been better for Star Wars and the film industry and TV industry in general for the show to have been made instead. I think we would be at this point now, 15 years later, we might have more opportunity to see different types of things within Star Wars and also externally that other people are, using that technology to make than we are seeing now. I think we would probably be in a little bit better world for creators now than if the show had been made. So I would say, yes, it's probably a good switch to do this timeline instead with the Underworld show, but only by a little bit. It's not a major difference. I still think Disney Plus has innovated and given us stuff with Star Wars and also pushed forward, other types of things as well, like Marvel, that, we might not have gotten if the roles were reversed.
I'm intrigued by the idea of trading it all, which I wouldn't have said a few years ago, but I do find myself missing George and missing his bizarre take on everything. And it is like bizarre but brilliant take. And I love The Force Awakens because it celebrates everything that Star Wars was, and it sets up for a future. My criticism of The Rise of Skywalker has always been that it just tries to be what Star Wars was before.
Yeah.
And so often and more I'm feeling that some of the things that are getting made are just trying to be what Star Wars was before. It's why I've really enjoyed the Andor press stuff a lot more than I did for anything else recently, because the stories are the talking points are, let's talk about character, let's talk about theme, let's talk about interesting stuff, not just, boy, wasn't it fun as a kid to have the Millennium Falcon toy and run around with lightsabers. But I love that stuff too, don't get me wrong, like it's fun, but like that was the only thing. And George wouldn't have gotten stuck in that, because as he once infamously said, I never got to see Star Wars. So he doesn't have those memories that Jon Favreau or Dave Filoni, Leslie Headland, all of us, he doesn't have those same memories. And so he's just doing something weird and new. Tony Gilroy doesn't have those memories because he's like, I don't really like Star Wars besides my own stuff. And so you get this sort of thing. And so I look at the current state of Star Wars, and I look at what Underworld could have been, what it might have been. And having just been a fan of what George did with the prequels and the Clone Wars and the originals, I just sort of think, wouldn't it be neat to have more of that? Wouldn't it be cool to have more of that? And so, and I kind of can't believe I'm saying this, I think I would trade it. And maybe it's a grass is greener situation. Maybe you watch one season Underworld and go, this is shit, give me the Force Awakens back. But I think to get more of Star Wars from the guy who created it, that is really enticing to me. And to have it put through the lens of people like Dave Filoni, like Ron Moore, who worked on this show, who have a more Star Wars fan upbringing and can sort of maybe rein in some of George's excesses and make it more palatable to a general audience. That to me is really, really enticing. So for this show, more than even for George's sequel trilogy, I think I'm like, yeah, I'll make the trade. Even though it pains me to get a little choked up here. No, I'm just losing the ability to speak. It pains me to get rid of to think about getting rid of all of this stuff that I've loved and enjoyed for the last 15 years. But yeah, give me 3 more proper seasons of the Clone Wars, 5 seasons of this, and 2 seasons of Detours. I'm kind of intrigued. That might be worth the trade.
That's quite a specter. Like, that's an incredible shadow to have an idea for something that is so good, and to have a track record for making things that is so good that you can take this whole corpus and just be like, this idea actually has me so intrigued that I'll throw all this out. But it seems like the majority of us kind of feel like we would be okay with that, which is amazing. I think it's a real testament to the creativity and how innovative George is, that this idea could be so grand that us not even having read a single line of the script for this show, just hearing descriptions of what it would have been from people is enough for us to say, wow, you have 13 years of media that we can just render obsolete and non-existent just so that we could potentially see what this could have been. I think that's amazing. That's really amazing. And again, it would be normal for someone to say this if they did not like what's going on with Disney Star Wars. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of people who would readily do this who, don't like anything about Disney Star Wars, but we're people that actually do like the majority of Disney Star Wars, and some of it we think is some of the greatest Star Wars ever made, and we still feel this way. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's not like we're not going to be there on opening night for the Mandalorian and Grogu. It's not like we're not going to be like so friggin' ready for that movie when it comes out, or next month when Andor premieres. Like, who's not? they can premiere those 3 episodes at 3 a.m. again for me. I'm freaking staying up for those ones. Like I'm like that's how like that like you're saying, very, very excited. It's not coming from a place of dislike of the current stuff. It's the intrigue of what did George have in mind? What was
Speak
it?
for yourself. I'm gonna be outside the theater with a sign says "Release Star Wars Underworld or Bust."
Ben's gonna become like a release the Snyder Cut person, but with Star Wars Underworld.
Don't tell me billboards, planes, you name it.
All of it.
Oh my god, I thought you were like trying to talk about someone called Billboard. Like, yeah, I'll be there with Billboard.
Him too.
I'm like, why is he there? Who's Billboard?
Yes. Hi, I'm William Boards Jr., but you can call me Bill.
Bill. Hey, wow. Billboard. Wow.
Billboards, the science guy. All right. Anyways, one more from Joel, who says, my own hot take, and this kind of, I think we'll put a button on this. My own hot take is that this show would have only been a masterpiece or a disaster. Ambition is one thing, but if the execution isn't there, ... oof.
What if it was a disaster piece?
What if it was a disaster piece?
I say it would have been Clone Wars, but in live action. It would have been just absolute madness. There would have been episodes that would have been at peak television, and there would have been episodes that people left us scratching our heads. Like that would have been the show.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and this is the thing that sometimes gets lost in history, is that the prequel trilogy, at the time that this would have been made, right? There were a lot of people that were still unreasonably angry about the prequel trilogy, much in the same way there are still people who are unreasonably angry about The Last Jedi and the sequel trilogy. Like, it's fine to dislike something. It's fine to go, that wasn't my cup of tea, but at a certain point, you got to move on. But that was the cultural tone towards Star Wars was not an overtly positive one at the time, especially towards George Lucas. There was that stupid documentary, The People versus George Lucas. People were, there were whole, look, I love Patton Oswalt. I think he's a very funny guy, and he did a great job moderating that Star Wars panel at Comic-Con last year. But he has a stand-up special in which he does a bit about going back in time and killing George Lucas with a shovel because he hates the prequels so much. That's the tone that we're dealing with. Everybody was laughing and enjoying that joke because everybody got it and kind of agreed at the time. And so the reaction to this show, unless it was like the second coming of The Empire Strikes Back immediately, would have almost certainly been negative. There would have been just article after blog post after podcast saying, yes, isn't George ruining Star Wars with the politics? And it's not like how I remember it as a 7-year-old. And like, it just would have been that on steroids again. And so, part of the reason George sold in the first place is he didn't want to deal with that anymore. Part of the reason he sold was because he couldn't get this made. And part of the reason he sold was he's just like, I'm old now and I want to quit. I want to retire and do other things. But like all of that, the people have only recently, the general pop culture has only recently come around to really appreciating the prequels. And even if this was a masterpiece in the way that, say, like Revenge of the Sith is, it likely wouldn't have been appreciated as such in 2009 or 2010 or 2011, 2012.
So now let's pair this into my favorite conspiracy theory. So what did we just calculated that the cost of the show was going to be $2 billion, 60 episodes of $40 million an episode. Let's go back to 2012 and remember the negotiations between Disney and George Lucas. George Lucas said, in order for me to give you my baby Star Wars, I'm going to need $2 billion of equity in your company, Disney, which I'm sure since he's turned into like $4 or $6 billion, because Disney stock is worth way more now than it was then. But he also asked for $2 billion in cold, hard cash. What? And then we have, of course, my favorite interview where George Lucas said that he was going to retire and make movies in his garage for his friends to see. So what if George Lucas took the $2 billion in cold hard cash that Disney paid him in unmarked bills and then used it to go to the Czech Republic and make 60 episodes of this show that only Steven Spielberg has seen?
Boy, the number of people you'd have to keep quiet.
I mean, $2 million buys you a lot of NDA forms.
A lot of silence, man.
Yeah.
What, I will say one other thing that was really nice in the interview was to hear that George and Rick are working together again.
I was going to mention that. Yeah.
McCallum mentions that that he's producing a pair of documentaries for George that will be screened at the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art, which is really cool. Like that sort of warmed my heart to the idea of the two of them, like, I don't know, hopping on a Zoom call to plot out a documentary the way they used to, and they're looking at a budget and they're like, doesn't this take you back to 1999? And
Imagine George saying, "Can you see my screen?"
Yeah. How do I share
screen share what they want?
No, to get in here, I can't figure out how to go in the
I swear, Rick, I'm not a cat. I'm not a cat.
Oh my
wow, there's a Zoom call deep cut there.
My
Goes back to
favorite
2020.
My favorite thing is that as I'm now watching videos talking about the 2028 Olympics, and they're showing these like aerial shots of like the LA stadiums and skyline, you can see the exterior of the museum finished in those shots. It's so cool to be like, there it is, it's ready, it'll probably be open by the time the Olympics happen. Very excited for that.
A few years ago at San Diego Comic-Con, some of the like curators from the Lucas Museum came and gave like a talk. It was like it was sort of like a 40-minute talk followed by 10 minutes of Q&A. And it was that museum is going to be fantastic. It's going to be so good. The way they went over everything was really it was really spectacular, and the audience there was very receptive to it, and it wasn't all Star Wars things. It was a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
There we go. So that's Rick McCallum. We just spent close to an hour on a show we're never gonna see. There you go. Don't you just love Star Wars?
Every week should be this. Rick needs to say something every week for us to talk about.
Do go listen to the Young Indie Chroniclers podcast. Very good interview with Rick. Do check it out. And they're throwing in the hashtag here, hashtag Unleash Underworld, which I think we should steal for us. We should just be like, hey, that should be our next live event. The Unleash Underworld at IHOP. And we'll invite Rick, and he can come and do a live reading of one of these.
Yes.
Perfect. He will definitely break his NDA for pancakes. I think.
We'll be like, Rick will buy you pancakes. He'll be like, sold. I mean,
look, if we can all pitch in, and cover Rick's court costs when he gets sued by Disney, then it'll be fine.
Yes.
It'll be fine. It'll be good.
Ironclad strategy.
You know what? We'll even go to the Czech Republic. We'll find the IHOP in the Czech Republic, and we'll do the show from there.
We might need to open a franchise, but we will open a franchise there.
I mean, they do call themselves the International.
The commitment's getting whatever it takes to get one Underworld script. We will open the first IHOP in Prague just to get Rick McCallum to show up.
I mean, if we're willing to trade in our memories of everything that's come out over the last 13 years for this, imagine what else we would do.
Yeah, imagine that. Oh, incredible. But no.
Besides, it's the International House of Pancakes. Come on.
That's right.
It should be in Prague.
Clearly, it has to be. Yeah, in the Bohemian area.
No-brainer.
Yeah,
exactly. Brilliant. But yes, hashtag Unleash Underworld, of course, reverts to the show, and it's maybe one day Rick will write the book, or somebody will ghostwrite it for him. All right. What else we got? Let's talk a little bit about Andor, because that's coming out real soon. And we just talked about Star Wars podcasts. Well, you know who else is talking about Star Wars podcasts? Tony Gilroy. He was interviewed by Collider this week, where he talked about the release schedule, the 3 episodes a week schedule for Andor. He said this quote, it's a Disney decision. There's an internal logic behind it. They have their reasons. It's kind of cool. I mean, it puts a burden on podcasters. What are they going to do? It's a movie of a movie a week, you know? Thank you, Tony.
This is why I love
Thank
Tony.
you.
This is why I love Tony. Tony's the best.
Quote Helen Lovejoy from The Simpsons, won't somebody please think of the podcasters?
It's amazing.
We love you, Tony.
Yeah. You know what we need is we need a podcast with Tony and Rick on it together. We get the two of them together. Just hash everything.
You know
out.
what?
R-rated Star Wars.
And the third co-host should be Freddie Prinze Jr.
Oh God. Yeah. That would be quite a discussion.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. I love
There
that.
you go.
Those three could cock for 10 hours, and I wouldn't turn it off.
No,
If they
that'd
talked
be
for 24 hours, I wouldn't sleep until the show was done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what do we think of the fact that it was a Disney decision? I think previously it sort of been implied that it was a Gilroy decision, and here he is saying, no, this was made above me. I'm cool with it, but this was made above me. What do we think of the fact that Disney's saying this is how we want to release the show?
Could mean so many things. I gotta hear what this logic is before I could even comment, because I don't know what their reasoning is. It could be like so many different things.
Yeah, there's sort of there's two main ones that I see that it's one or the other. It's either we don't care about Star Wars on streaming, and we especially don't care about Andor, so have the whole thing be over in 4 weeks.
No.
Or
no.
Or my hope, and I said this a couple weeks ago when this first came out. I want this to be because this is the way. This is the way forward. That the plan for Star Wars streaming shows is to not have them run for 8 to 12 weeks, but to have them be limited series events with longer episodes where it's sort of like a movie of the week for somewhere between 3 and 5 weeks. That's my hope.
Yeah. I mean, my
the
hope,
other one.
My hope is just, them seeing what I thought would be a good justification for this, which is because, each set of these episodes is like a year in time. It's like a self-contained story, so it makes sense to air it on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I said previously, like, I think from a Disney perspective, I fully expected, like, okay, they want to drag this out. Like, they want their show to be in the limelight for as long as possible. People talking about it, people watching it, like, because obviously there is this whole cycle. And Tony Gilroy I think he's talking about the whole system there, but he's specifically calling out podcasters, which we appreciate. But just the whole thing, and I love that he's talking about this because it's a direct acknowledgement that the filmmakers behind this stuff acknowledge that there is this whole system that's developed behind this stuff where it's the reviews every week, the podcast, the reactions, all the stuff that happens every single week. And you want to keep that going as much as possible. And from a Disney perspective, I thought, well, it makes sense that they would want to keep that going as long as possible. I think also it might be that maybe they heard some of this feedback. Maybe they were reading a few too many YouTube comments or Facebook comments and going like, people were kind of getting bored. Like that second episode of those things, we're kind of like not feeling it. And we're like, okay, we better just have the 1-2 punch of just release the 3 episodes. Bang, people can't complain about being bored. They're getting the full picture every week. And thanks. Like I said, not a decision I would have made, but I get why they're doing it because it definitely sounds like something that a decision Tony Gilroy would have made, but apparently not. So I'm curious how he would have wanted it to be released. I'm curious.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I definitely think my money's on that they're starting to listen to a lot more fan feedback more than ever right now. And I think the pacing thing, the release thing is the first place that they'll start to kind of implement any kind of feedback, I think, directly. So I think this is a direct response to probably criticisms through even Acolyte, Skeleton Crew, but this decision would have been actually didn't he say he got notified in like November or something? I don't know, but I just feel like this is a very conscious decision because that's such a key feedback piece from a lot of the shows, whether people hate it, whether people love the show. That could actually be one thing that people really agree on is like, oh, this was just too slow. I want to watch it back to back. This is better, like all in one. So yeah, I really, my money's on that. They know that these stories were so insular, like of these arcs that he's created. So I think they're just trying to make it have the best kind of impact.
Yeah, the viewing experience matters, and it does matter for the first viewing as well. And I think the people that have come to Andor since its original run have reiterated how watching 3 episodes together is a much more fulfilling experience than watching them individually. We can all talk about how much we love cliffhangers and stuff, but you want the episode to be fulfilling. And if you just have an episode that's just a cliffhanger, or that where stuff happens but there's not a real like arc to the narrative, you can walk away feeling unfulfilled. And I think there was a contingent of folks who felt that way for season 1 of Andor. Let's see. There's plenty of other stuff with Tony Gilroy. He also did an hour-long live stream on the Star Wars YouTube channel today. That was really good, despite the weird audio issues. But he was there. Adria Horna was there. I forgot all the names. Genevieve O'Reilly.
You really went to another dimension there. That was great.
I was like, what the frig is Bix's name? Oh my god, why can I not remember? Genevieve O'Reilly and Duncan. What's his face?
Duncan.
I can't remember names. Duncan Powell. Good old Duncan Powell. Melshi.
Uncharacteristically,
as I know him.
names now.
They all show up. It's actually really, really good, and I would definitely recommend it. But there's tons of good Andor stuff that's out there. Let's save some of it for another week and instead check in with The Mandalorian and Grogu, the next Star Wars movie. Jon Favreau made kind of a surprise appearance at South by Southwest this week. It was part of a Disney Parks panel. Where they went over a lot of, the things that they do to create world building at the parks. And one of the things, if you've paid attention to what you can see around Galaxy's Edge these days, is these little droids, the BDX droids. They sometimes show up and they kind of wander around and they look like cute little droids doing stuff. They're going to be in The Mandalorian and Grogu. This is our first little peek behind the scenes at this movie. These droids are going to be there. The Anzellans from season 3 are going to be there. Obviously, you wonder. I can see it going one of two ways. Jon Favreau is absolutely the kind of guy who would go, you know what? We're giving these guys a starring role in the movie. I could see him just being like, you know what? We're going to have 3 of these characters following Din Djarin around for the entire movie, or they'll be somewhere in the background. And this was just a neat little thing to have take place at South by Southwest event. They also talked about the updates that are coming to Smuggler's Run, which is the Millennium Falcon ride. That is going to it's going to launch. This update is going to launch at the same weekend as the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, which I think we can finally put to bed that ridiculous speculation that we were doing, that the movie might get released a little bit sooner, because obviously they want it to have that corporate synergy with the parks. But there will be a new mission that will involve flying the Millennium Falcon that ties in with the movie, that will take you to Bespin, the wreckage of the second Death Star, and the sand crawlers on Tatooine. Ben, I'll throw this over to you first. What did you think of these reveals from Jon Favreau to make him?
Yeah, no, this was really cool, and there's some video online you can see it of, because he rolls out quite literally this other BDX droid that they introduce, and it's a animatronic BDX droid with an Anzellan called Otto riding him on top of him. And it's as good as you can imagine it being. Like, it's fully articulated. Like Jon Favreau was literally like talking to this dude, and he's like, speaking Anzellan nonsense and apparently cursing him because the Disney Imagineers on stage are like, whoa, don't say that, doing their thing. So that was very cool to see, and apparently that's going to be around at the parks. But just in general, like, I'll be honest. I've ridden Smuggler's Run several times. It's a great ride. But if I'm going to Disney, if I'm going tomorrow, of course, I'm very I'm Disney spoiled. I've been there a lot. But if I go tomorrow, I'm not going to Smuggler's Run first. It's a ride that I'm like, okay, I've ridden it a few times. I'm good. And I really, even in the few years after it was released, I'm like, is this it? I thought they would really try to update it pretty often. I thought it was going to be like Star Tours where they would add more missions and more stuff to it. The thing you do with Hondo, it's great and it's fun. Unless you're sitting 2 rows back and there's a 5-year-old flying the Falcon, it's not as fun in a ride. But it's a great ride, and I think this is a much needed refresh. I think this is great. Adding this to this ride, I think, and tying it in. And he talks a lot. He says that basically it's going to like not retell the movie, but tell it from a different perspective, which I'm like, okay, this is really going to be kind of like a la, the kind of like Star Tours on steroids, where you Star Tours, you go to Crate and you're in the Battle of Crate and you're seeing the movie from a different perspective, something like that. With this, that's really, really cool. And I think there's a lot of possibilities, obviously, with it, because you have the concept art with the Razor Crest, which I don't know if that's a spoiler yet, but it's not now. Razor Crest kind of back in the Mandalorian Grogu seems to be. So it's just very cool. It's very cool to see that they're going to get an update to this ride. And also, I have thoughts, like implications. Does this mean that Cloud City is in Mandalorian Grogu? That's my question.
That would be pretty awesome.
So Favreau kind of addressed that. He did say, he didn't say this on stage. This was a quote he gave to the Disney Parks blog. He said, "This isn't going to retell what happens in the movie. It's more like participating in something that's happening just off camera from what you see in the film." So it kind of leaves it open. It could go either way.
Yeah.
I kind of suspect maybe not, but then Favreau again loves his returns to classic Star Wars locations. So Cloud City could be very much on the table. Ben, I will just say very quickly, Ben, you're completely wrong about the Millennium Falcon ride. It's still a perfect ride. There is no flaws. I hated it? Did I say it was bad? Yes,
did I ever?
Yes, you did.
Said something about a 3-year-old.
Yeah, and also
sometimes it kind of sucks when you're not flying. Okay, that's all I'm saying. Gunner seat sucks. I'm sorry, it does.
When you have a 5-year-old at the controls, that's the best because they're terrible at flying, and so it gets extra shaky and is really fun.
Oh my god!
You're crashing into friggin' everything. It's awesome. No, when I go to Disney, my end of the day routine is for the last hour that I'm there. I just get on the Falcon ride, and then I get off, and I just get on and get off, and I get on and get off. And the last time I went, one of the cast members recognized what I was doing. And there was a group of 5 people ahead of me. And they said to me, we can do one of 2 things here. You can go with this group of 5. You can be an engineer. You can do the usual thing. Or there is no one immediately in line behind you. I can get you a cockpit to yourself.
Nice.
So obviously I said, give me the cockpit to myself. And I got to fly the Millennium Falcon completely solo. The only thing that I wish they would have let me done is I wish they would have fired it up so it was like there were 2 people in there, so I could have operated both sticks instead of just one. But I did get the Falcon cockpit to myself, which was pretty sweet.
That's pretty awesime.
Very fun.
That's cool. I've always wanted to do that.
Shout out to that Disney staffer who did that, because that was
very nice.
Yeah, I think the exciting thing with this ride is sort of kind of what they should have done kind of like 5 years ago. Which is really clearly tie in what is happening in the media, the movies, the shows, to what you can physically go to in real life. Like I think of Mando season 1. Maybe it's hard to do for like a show because I guess it moves fast. But just when you see it, whatever age, and then you go, oh my gosh, I could physically visit, the bar on Navarro from Mandalorian, and there's an animatronic Werner Herzog. That's so cool. I want to do that. Amazing.
I want to just sit opposite the table from animatronic
That's the
Werner
right.
Herzog
You sit
and
there
just
and you like
have
figure out. You're
just
like,
all.
hey,
I
it's
just want to
bargain.
sit there.
baby.
I just want to sit there and say to him, bounty hunting is a complicated profession. And then he can go back, yes, bounty hunting is a complicated. We'll just say that back and forth to each other for an hour until that same Disney staffer who let me have the Falcon to myself comes in and says, sir, you need to leave.
Yes. Perfect.
Wow.
But yes, maybe that wasn't the best example. But just making more of a point of
No, Hannah,
connect to
that
what
was
we
the
see.
perfect example.
I would
It was
do
the
that.
perfect.
You would do that? Okay, there you go. Because then you can like feel a connection. Like, I don't have anything against Batu, but I'm just like, they created something that didn't even exist in the movies that they had just released. Like, oh, bro, just make it connect. Make it something we see.
Yeah. Some of the best bits of Galaxy's Edge are like when you do interact with something you understand, like when you can talk to the characters, like the like handful of times that you've met Chewbacca. Like I met Chewbacca and I was wearing a Boba Fett shirt and he gave me such a hard time about it, all in Wookiee. And it's like, that was awesome. That was awesome. I met Rey and got really nervous and turned into a babbling idiot. Also awesome. Like, it's like you get the whole freaking those are the parts that are really like sort of magical, because you do feel like you're interacting with something that you know. Whereas sometimes it is sort of like, oh, this is just sort of like a mishmash of all the best Star Wars things, but it doesn't feel true to one specific Star Wars thing, which separates it from other theme parks or even themed parts of Disneyland that are like, oh, you walk into Cars Land, which I don't even really, I've seen the first Cars movie, but you're like, oh, I'm just in that world. You walk into Harry Potter Land, Universal Studios, there's the castle, there's everything. You're like, oh, I'm in Harry Potter. Sorry. And I cut you off. You jump back in here.
I forget what I was going to say. They should have made Batu Jakku, actually, funny enough. That would have been great. Like, we just imagine that, like, Force Awakens comes out, it's massively big, and then, you know, like 6 months after the movie comes out, Disneyland opens with Jakku. Like, that's would have been insane.
Jakku definitely would have matched the environment of Florida more. I guarantee you that.
And you know what? They could have hired they could have hired Ron DeSantis to play Unkar Plutt. It would have been perfect.
Oh my gosh! That's the same person. That is the same.
Yeah, same person.
I can see it.
Quarter portion.
Yeah.
1/4 portion, unless you're gay, in which case you get no portion. Ron DeSantis.
Only 2 different portions.
Do you think they'll let me
can't
into
have
Florida?
2 of the same portion?
Do you think they'll let me into Florida next year for celebration?
You might be the 51st state by then, so who knows?
Oh my goodness!
Hey now.
You're not even gonna need a passport. No passport needed.
Oh my god. There we go.
Disneyland, Greenland, coming up.
Yeah, right.
Next year.
Straight through the Panama Canal. This concludes our current events segment. Joel drops another super chat saying Galaxy's Edge was going to be more expansive and story driven, but apparently Chapek got cheap when developing it. Yes, if you've ever watched the 4-hour takedown of Galactic Star Cruiser that Jenny Nicholson did, she kind of lays out that a lot of the things that were planned for Star Cruiser were originally Galaxy's Edge ideas, and they were like, they did like the cheap version for Star Cruiser, when like the original version of these things were going to be were like big dream big ideas, the kind of things you expect from Disneyland. And they wound up scaling them back until they got rid of them in the park, and then they did a scaled back version of them in the ill-fated hotel experience.
It does still shock me when I go to Galaxy's Edge. Both parks. I'm just like, or especially like Disney World, because I'm more familiar with that one. I just go that, and you kind of like, you walk past the plaza and you go down the street, you go towards Rise of the Resistance, and it's just like, there's just nothing there.
Just trees.
It's just grass
it's like
and trees.
that
I'm just
Disneyland,
like,
too.
feels like there should be some stuff here. Like, what do you
Yeah.
guys? It's free real estate. Like, come on, like, what are you doing?
Where are the Ewoks running around in the bush? Like,
Right.
like something like that. Like,
I mean, they have like in their defense, like they have like done some great things. Like they added Mando and Grogu. They've had characters. Now Luke's gonna be wandering around in the park. Like, and they've had this droids too. Like, it's great. There's other things. And Rise of Resistance came after the park opened, and it is arguably one of the best rides Disney's ever done. So they have tried to quote unquote fix it, but it feels like there may be some things to add still.
I once got into a stare down with Kylo Ren. It was great. I was there with Matthew from Ion Cannon, and Kylo finally walks away from me. I said to him, "I think I'm a Reylo now. I think I finally get it."
So good.
I looked in his eyes for 5 seconds.
There we go. All right, let's do one question from Ask the SWU. Let's do one question.
Because that will take an hour to answer. So
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
go.
It'll just double the length of the show. No, this is going to be an adventure. This one comes from Jesse B. I assume you guys didn't do this one last week. If you did, stop me.
No, I've been saving this one. For the
Okay,
record,
good.
Jesse set this one in like weeks ago, and I was
Yeah.
saving this for all of us to be here.
Okay,
Nice.
so Jesse says, "Good evening, SWU. Don't mind me. Just stopping in for a quick, easy question. Out of all the characters in all of Star Wars existence, name your number one favorite. No explanation, just the number one. Starting with Dom, and go." Technically not a question, but so I apologize. So here's this at the end, and he just puts a question mark. The favorite character. It's a tie between Agent Kolar and Bulio. Win the war. No, R2D. No, Chewbacca.
Wow.
What?
Wow.
But everybody knows the answer to this. I don't even need to say it.
Oh, yeah.
We're
Dude, I
going
was
back
gonna
to
say
holding
Aura
up the
Singh.
action
I would have said
figures.
Aura Singh, brother.
There you go.
But back to holding up the action figures. We got a Quinlan Voss action figure.
Yes.
There you go.
Don't even need to say it.
Ben, no thoughts, just favorite character.
All I'll say is hello there.
Hannah, go. No thoughts, favorite character.
Boba Fett. Where?
Is that just because you and Tamura Morrison are besties now? You're like, yeah.
Really?
It's good enough. It's good enough of a reason.
Yeah.
No, it is. I've had a soft spot for oh my god, now I can't. Elia Kane, ever since we met her actress at Celebration for no good reason, just other than her actress was cool and that's kind of a fun character.
I will say that Tamara Morrison was the only good part of Moana 2. So
Tamara Morrison, no matter what he's in, is like kind of always the best part of it. Even Attack of the Clones, like he's kind of low key the best part.
That was the only redeemable quality of that movie was his lines. Very good lines.
Of Attack of the Clones?
He's the only good part of Aquaman
Moana
too.
2.
Oh, so good.
You know, he released an album.
Yeah.
Don't even get me started. Yeah, he serenaded me with this. How do you not know? Do you not know me?
That's some bangers. Yeah.
No, I was speaking more to the audience, you know.
Oh, true. I forgot we're on a live podcast, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not just this isn't just our regular conversations.
There are people watching.
I'm seeing him in 2 weeks and again in Celebration. I'm seeing him everywhere. I can't stop. Your
BFFs.
Is that going steady at this point? Is that what
it is? We're looking at buying a house together.
Yep.
Is Tilly aware? Does she know? Are we?
She's very consensual about my.
Yeah, this is a modern.
whole part
Nice to be in a very, very open place. Yeah, good.
Yep.
Yeah. I think my Discord, my bio even says I'm 99% gay but 1% straight for Tim Morrison. My bio on Discord.
Honestly,
check out anyone who wasn't.
That's good.
Oh, so good.
There we go. All right, that's it. That's what we're ending on. That'll do. That's where we will begin to wrap things up for this week.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching and listening. Make sure you follow us on social media at the SWU for more stuff throughout the week. Dominic, thank you so much for hosting tonight.
It's my pleasure, as always. This was great fun talking about Rick McCallum, the legend that is Rick McCallum, and Star Wars Underworld and all of that. Still such a fascinating, interesting, untold piece of Star Wars history that I'd love to know the full story behind someday. And maybe we will. Maybe one day Rick will tell us, or someone else will tell us. But really, really fascinating stuff. As always, want to remind folks, if you want to check out my writing about Star Wars, you can subscribe to my Substack, dominicgjones.substack.com, aka hot off the press. Tomorrow, aka today, when most of you are listening to this, I'll have a rather lengthy review of the new novel, The Mask of Fear, being posted. A very, very good novel. Honestly, one of the best Star Wars books in years. It transcends being a good Star Wars book into just being a good book. And it is shockingly timely and shockingly relevant. There are points when you're reading, especially the Mon Mothma chapters, when you're like, am I reading the news? Am I sure that I didn't pick up a newspaper by mistake here? And then you get to a Bail Organa chapter and he's all like, the Jedi! And I'm like, oh, right, phew. Okay, this is still fiction. So check that out. That'll be up on Friday. Again, dominicgjones.substack.com. And if you want to talk some hockey, check out Game Over Toronto. We'll talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. It'll be lots of fun. All right, that's it. Can't wait to do all this again in 7 days' time.
I just can't wait till you bring beach hockey discussion to your hockey podcast.
Hey,
because I'll tune in for that.
If the Leafs get bounced in the first round again this year, we may turn to the beach hockey.
At Dominic J25 is where you can follow them on social media. Ben, thank you so much for hosting as well.
Oh, it was a pleasure, as always, and a pleasure to have Rick back in the news. Come back anytime, Rick. We love you, and someone who does not.
Thanks so much, Rick, for joining in tonight. We appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, Rick watches the show. We knew that.
Oh, man. Oh, that was too funny. It turned my camera off. That's
Where did it happen?
There you go.
I don't care if Rick's watching or not. I'm going to tell him I love him, okay? Because he's the man.
Amazing. And you can follow Ben on social media at Ben Hart with no E. Hannah, thank you as well for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Another great week of good fun, good memes. Can't wait to do it all again.
Hannah, you always seem slightly confused when the end of the show comes around. You're like, yeah, right. Yeah, I was on. Yeah.
Dude, this was like a fever dream, honestly. Yeah, and especially the show. I'm like opening up other tabs now. I'm like, we're about to end, and then it's always like, thanks, Hannah. And I'm just like, oh yeah.
And, most podcasts, this is a very like old school podcast thing that we do. Most podcasts don't do this anymore. They're just like, hey, follow the guest. Here's their Instagram. All right, bye.
I know. I gotta wait for Dom's like 8-minute speech about something before I say bye. And then Ben's like barbecue, and
it was only 7.5 minutes today. Damn it.
Oh my gosh. You've got to know that the show never ends until we slap our knees and say, welp. That is the signal that the show is officially over. Welp.
But even then, there's about a 15-minute outro. So I hear it and I go, oh, that's my 15-minute warning that we're about to end.
That's right. I love music looping technology. It opens up so many possibilities for us now that we can loop the music. At the Raeside, Raeside is where you can follow Hannah on social media. You can follow me at Seek3PO. Don't forget to swing by our Discord after you finish watching and listening to the show. Link is in the description. Check out that great Star Wars Rebels rewatch to tie into Andor that we got going on. And of course, make sure to check out all the other shows on the Star Wars Underworld network, the Raeside Iron Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, Tractor Beam, and more. And
Let me just very quickly say, I mentioned the Mask of Fear. Ion Cannon did a very lengthy review with many guests. Check that out. I'm told it was very good. I haven't listened yet, but I will.
Check that out at Ion Cannon. It's on this channel right here. So you can watch all the backlog of their shows on this YouTube channel, and make sure you, if you get notifications for Star Wars Underworld, you should be getting notifications for their show as well when they go live, since it's on the same channel. So make sure you turn that notification bell on if you want to watch them live and interact with them over there on Ion Cannon. And huge thanks to our super chatters tonight and our channel members. Last thing, if you haven't, make sure you hit that subscribe button on your way out. All right, for Ben and Dom and Hannah, my name is Chris, and may the Force be with you.
It's a wrap.